So over time, it starts to bring the field of this system into coherence. And you start to see how much more effective the organization starts to become, how there's a lot more flow and synchronicity in the organization. Things seem to happen by chance. You meet the right person, or you make a discovery that you hadn't thought of making before. These are all the kind of things that have been documented over the years of working with this approach through the Center for Ecotherapy. So there are three main phases. We have this balancing phasing is what I described just now, where you're really working maybe almost daily with the organization. Once you've reached these coherent values, there's then what's called the stabilization phase, and that's a phase where all the kind of different parts of the organization start to come into alignment with the organization as a whole. And then there's a period where you're just continuing on and checking in on the system every so often. So that's very simply, in a nutshell, an example of how you can work with an organization very concretely at the energetic level. It's at the moment in the Netherlands, it's a 4-year vocational training process. So you'll understand that what I shared with you now is really just a very small amount of the information available. But you can find much more in the resource section and, of course, on the website. A lot of it's still in Dutch, but part of what we're going to be doing at Ubiquity is looking to bring this approach in English to into the English-speaking world. So that's how you work to make an energetic intervention with an organization. One of the other pieces that I in particular have been exploring here is, so what are the implications of leadership for this? If we assume that there is this energetic dimension to our organizations, that it has an energetic architecture, and we know that the steward of this system, the leader of this system, you could say, influences through their awareness and intention, as we saw in the Princeton project. If they influence this energetic reality, then what would be some tips for leaders who are able to accept that reality in terms of how would you go about your behavior? What are things to bear in mind in terms of how you positively influence the energetic architecture of your organization? So I'd just like to share with you a few of those principles, that some of which have come out of the ecotherapy experience and some of which have come out of my direct experience working as a leader consciously, energetically with the organizations that I've led. So I've called these principles for leading from the field. And the first principle is what I've called boundaries. Know the boundaries of your leadership. So what's very important working energetically is to define what it is that you're working with. So know, is it your department? Is it the organization as a whole? Where are the boundaries of your land that you're accountable for? Know those boundaries. Who and what are you accountable for? What exactly are you leading? And be in an authentic relationship with those that you're accountable to. So if you're in an organization and you have your own department and then there's a boss above you, then make sure that the relationship to that person is also as clear and clean as it can be. The next is the principle of stillness, and we touched on this in some of the mindfulness work. One of the things about working at the energetic level is that it's not a dimension that we can work with in the world around us. It's not stuff we can see and measure. You access information about that level from inside of yourself. So that's why it's so important to develop a practice such as the one we experimented with, where you come into a level of stillness in yourself, where you're able to quiet your mind, because the mind is not the place that you're going to be able to access this information from. We have to learn to work from an inner space, a more intuitive knowing than it is that we're used to. So cultivating that ability helps us to work more consciously with the energetic architecture of our systems. The third is intention. As we talked about in the Princeton project, it's now basically been proved almost beyond a doubt, because they spent so many years working on it at Princeton and had to continually improve the scientific evidence, that intention affects reality. So for a leader who's leading an organization, to be really clear on what it is that you're wanting to create, on your ambitions for the future, and to start visualizing those, to start really imagining what that reality might look like, and to be very clear with those intentions, to keep them in your awareness the whole time, will increase the likelihood of you actually reaching those goals, because it'll bring that reality into the energetic architecture, which will enable it to come into the relational and into the material. Presence. So this is about keeping a certain lightness in your quality of being in the organization. As we've talked about in these times, it's important to be light and experimental. But also at the energetic level, energy moves when we're light and open. When we start to get serious and contracted, things start to block up. So if we want the energy to keep flowing, we need to try to keep ourselves open, keep ourselves light, and that will enable things to keep moving through. Notice what things start to emerge. Be really present with our reality so that we can really see what's actually there rather than what we think is going to be there or what we want to be there from our experience of the past. The next one is the principle around attention. As energetically as a leader, where we put our attention is where we direct the energy. You know, they say where you put your attention is what grows. So it's very important to be paying attention to all the different elements of the system that you're leading. So if you have many departments in your organization or many different areas within the community or many different parts of your land, to make sure that in your mind you're taking those into account, that you're thinking about all these different pieces. Because if there's a piece which you don't pay attention to, then gradually the energy will drop out of that area. People will start to get discouraged and it'll become a drain on the organization as a whole. So to keep your attention on the system as a whole and all the different parts. The next principle focuses on feeling. So where attention is more about our awareness, we talked about this in the piece around other leadership qualities for emergence. It's important to be really in touch with the people in the organization, more from a heart place than from a head place. So how are people feeling about their work? What's going on? That's a source of information that doesn't always show up in the statistics, but it's a very important one because it determines people's motivation. So to make sure that you have a feel of the key issues in the organization, that will also make sure that the energy stays coherent in the field. The next one is content. So be actively interested in the content of what people are doing. One of the trends that there has been more recently is to bring in managers who are maybe good at people managing, but actually know nothing about the content of what's being done in the organization. And that's proven to have a lot of problems because you can be very good at managing people, but if you have no understanding of what they're working on, then they don't have you're unlikely to get a very good relationship because people are passionate about the content of what they're working on. So you don't want to just be looking at managing them if you don't really understand what it is that they're passionate about and what it is that they're working on. So make sure that you develop an interest in the content of what it is people are actually doing. The next one is around pain. Often things have happened in the past in an organization that have created some kind of pain or disturbance or hurt. And that, unless it's cleared up, can kind of draw the energy out of the system and can start to create blockages because people don't dare to talk about something or they don't dare to do something that they did before because the last time they tried it, it turned out badly. So it's important as a leader to be aware of where's the hurt that's being carried in the organization? Where are some of the pain points from the past that we need to bring into our awareness and help to transform? Because they're holding energy. And unless we release those, that energy will continue to exert a pull on the organization from the past. So to bring past trauma into the present and transform it to release that energy. As a footnote, that's often very important around founders of an organization. If someone has founded the organization, they're holding a very core seed energy for the organization. And if they've been kicked out of the organization or they've left the organization on bad terms, that will often create a very uneasy dynamic in the energetic architecture. So it's important to pay attention to those transitions, particularly from founders into an organization as it moves into the future. The next principle is about place. So in the Eastern traditions, this is often normal, that we understand that the physical place we locate ourselves is very important, that there are many different energies in the earth that you can measure, places that are more stressful, places that give us energy more. So to be very conscious of the place that we locate ourselves as an organization, the place that we're operating in, and just bring that into our awareness, if that's the minimum we do, just to be aware of the place we're in. In a lot of the Eastern traditions, they'll think very carefully about how you actually situate your organization, the angle, how it relates to the different directions, north, south, east, west. All of these things play an important part and come out of some ancient wisdom that we've often forgotten, particularly in the West. Another important principle is the principle that I've called form. So if we think of everything as having a certain energy or resonance, words themselves carry energy, carry resonance. Numbers have a certain resonance to them. Geometry and form does. Certain forms give us more energy than other forms. So as we think about the design of our places, to be more conscious of which forms are more energy giving and which forms are more energy draining. It is important what we call our organizations, how we name things. Names carry energy. And you can find more on this in the resource section. But to be very conscious of that, not to be flippant with our words, our language, our numbers, and our geometry, to be very conscious of the fact that that does impact our energetic reality. Timing. There are certain rhythms of time. And many different approaches that have been looked at over there. One of the more interesting ones is the whole Elliott wave, which has been used a lot on the stock market. They tracked how stock market went up and down and noticed that there were certain rhythms and patterns in that. And you can generalize out from that and see times where the organization is more fit to be moving out into the world, and other times where it's more likely to be inward focused and developing new ideas and new concepts. So to start to look into this whole area of time and rhythms of time and noticing when things tend to work better and when things don't. Progress. And we've talked about that in the context of governance and things. Really just focusing on the simplest next natural step. Coming present the whole time to what's real now in the organization and looking at what feels like the next step to take. Not worrying about taking too many steps into the future, but really focusing on the present and the next little step that we have to take. So there's a number of principles come out of experience and practices about what it means when you're a leader to accept that there is an energetic dimension to things, an invisible dimension that we can't see so much, but that informs our relationships and our material level of reality, and how we can start to take that more into account in terms of the way that we lead. So in the final session, what we'll be doing is looking at one other example that's been around for a while of people working more consciously with the energetic dimensions, with a different language to it, but that has worked particularly well, particularly in working with gardens and natural environments, and more recently been translated into organizational contexts as well.